Okay, so we're in Tractate Menachot. This is Daf 9. So at the end of 8, it says the Gemara raised an objection to the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan from a Braita. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beteira says, from where is it derived that if Gentiles surrounded the temple courtyard and were firing projectiles inside to the point that it became impossible to remain in the courtyard on account of the threat, that the priest enter the sanctuary and partake of the offerings of the most sacred order and the remainders of the meal offerings while inside the sanctuary? The verse states, every meal offering, this is Daf 9, every meal offering of theirs, and every sin offering of theirs, and every guilt offering of theirs, which they may render unto me, shall be most holy for you, and for your sons. In the sanctuary shall you eat them. Numbers 18, 9 through 10. This indicates that although the mitzvah is to consume offerings of the most sacred order in the courtyard, in certain instances the priest may consume these offerings inside the sanctuary, in the most holy place. The Gemara explains its objection, but according to the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan, why do I need this verse? Let him say here as well that, as the verse states, in the court of the tent of meeting they shall eat it. Leviticus 6:9. That is in the temple courtyard. It is logical that the halacha with regard to the minor area should not be more stringent than the halacha with regard to the major one. So the Gemara explains, consuming an offering is not the same as slaughtering it. So the slaughter of an offering is part of the sacrificial service, and it is not considered disrespectful for a person to serve his master in the place of his master. So that is within the sanctuary as well as in the courtyard. Therefore, we say that the halakha with regard to the minor area should not be more stringent than the halakha with regard to the major one. By contrast, with regard to the consumption of an offering, since a person may not eat in the place of his master, the only reason that it is permitted to consume an offering inside the sanctuary is that it is written in the verse, in a most holy place shall you eat them. So had this not been written in the verse explicitly, we would not say that the halakha with regard to the minor area should be more stringent than the halakha with regard to a major one. It is stated, if one mixed the oil of a meal offering into it or outside the wall of the temple courtyard, Rabbi Yochanan says that it is disqualified, and Reish Lakish says that it is valid. So Reish Lakish says it is valid as it is written, and he shall pour oil upon it and put frankincense upon it, Leviticus 2:1. And then it is written, and he shall bring it to Aaron's sons the priest, and he shall remove, Leviticus 2:2. Reish Lakish explains, the sages derive from here that from the removal of the handful onward, the rites performed with the meal offering are solely a mitzvah of the priesthood. Accordingly, the verse taught about pouring and mixing that they are valid when performed by a non-priest. And from the fact that the priesthood is not required for the mixing, it may be derived that it is also not required that its performance be inside the walls of the temple courtyard. And Rabbi Yochanan says this meal offering is disqualified since a meal offering's performance is in a service vessel. Therefore, granted that the priesthood is not required, yet in any event, its performance inside the temple courtyard is required. So the Gemara notes that it is taught in a Braita in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan. If a meal offering was mixed with a non-priest, it is valid. But if it was mixed outside the wall of the temple courtyard, it is disqualified. It was stated with regard to a meal offering that became lacking in its full measure before the removal of the handful. Rabbi Yochanan says that the owner shall bring additional flour from within his home and shall fill the missing part of the measure of his meal offering. Reish Lakish says, he shall not bring flour from within his home and fill it. Instead, he must bring a new meal offering. The Gemara explains, Rabbi Yochanan says that he brings flour from within his home and he fills it, as the removal of the handful establishes it as a meal offering to the extent that it may become disqualified. Before the removal, one may always add flour to the meal offering. Reish Lakish says he shall not bring flour from within his home and fill it, and the sanctity of the service vessel establishes that as a meal offering. Therefore, once the meal offering was placed in a service vessel and sanctified, it is disqualified if it became lacking. Rabbi Yochanan raised an objection to Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. Reish Lakish from the Mishnah, Nagaim 14:10, discussing the log of oil brought by a leper, and the case where the log lacked a full measure of it In the case where the log lacked a full measure, if it became lacking before the priest poured it into his palm in order to place it on the right thumb and big toe of the leper, he shall fill it. Clearly, the service vessel containing the log does not sanctify the oil to the extent that it can become disqualified. The Gemara notes, indeed, this is a conclusive refutation of the opinion of Reish Lakish. So it was stated with regard to the remainder of the meal offering that became lacking between the removal of the handful and the burning upon the altar. Rabbi Yochanan says that one burns the handful on account of such a remainder, and that the remainder is then permitted for consumption. And Reish Lakish says the one does not burn a handful on account of the remainder. So the Gemara notes, according to the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, everyone agrees that the handful is burned on account of the remainder. In other words, both Amoraim, Rabbi Yochanan, and Reish Lakish concur that it is the halacha according to the Tana of Rabbi Eliezer. When they disagree, it is concerning the halacha according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehoshua. So the Gemara cites the dispute in question. As we learned in a Mishnah, 26a, if after the handful was removed, the remainder of the meal offering became ritually impure, or if the remainder of the meal offering was burned, or if the remainder of the meal offering was lost, according to the principle of Rabbi Eliezer, who says that with regard to an animal offering, the blood is fit for sprinkling, even if there is no meat that can be eaten, the meal offering is fit, and the priest burns the handful. But according to the principle of Rabbi Yehoshua, who says that with regard to a meal offering, the blood is fit for sprinkling only if there is meat that can be eaten, it is unfit. And the priest does not burn the handful, as the handful serves to render the remainder permitted. And one who disqualifies the remainder of a meal offering that became lacking between the removal of the handful and its burning upon the altar, Reish Lakish holds in accordance to the plain meaning of the opinion of Rabbi Yehoshua. And the one who deems that the remainder fit, Rabbi Yochanan, maintains that when Rabbi Yehoshua says that the remainder is unfit, he says so only there in a case where nothing remained from the meal offering other than the remainder. Since the handful is intended to render permitted for consumption the remainder of the meal offering, if there is no remainder at all, then the handful is not burned. But in a case where there remained a portion of the remainder, Rabbi Yochanan maintains that even Rabbi Yehoshua concedes to Rabbi Eliezer that the handful is fit to be burned. So the Gemara cites a proof for Rabbi Yochanan. It is clear that this is Rabbi Yehoshua's opinion, as it is taught in a Braita that Rabbi Yehoshua says with regard to any of the offerings that are mentioned in the Torah from which there remains either an olive bulk of meat or an olive bulk of fat, the halacha is that the priest sprinkles the blood of that offering and thereby permits either the remaining meat for consumption or the remaining fat for sacrifice upon the altar. But if there remains only half an olive bulk of meat and half an olive bulk of fat, he does not sprinkle the blood, as the consumption or burning of anything less than an olive bulk is not significant enough to warrant the sprinkling of the blood. The volumes of the meat and the fat do not combine to form a whole olive bulk. So the Braita continues, and in the case of a burnt offering, even if there remains only half an olive bulk of flesh and half an olive bulk of fat, he sprinkles the blood, because in the case of a burnt offering, it is entirely consumed, as the flesh and fat are both burned upon the altar. There is in fact an olive bulk of the offering that is designated for burning upon the altar, and with regard to a meal offering, even though it remains entirely intact, he shall not sprinkle. Parenthetically, the Gemara asks, what is the mention of a meal offering doing here in a Braita that discusses slaughtering offerings? So there is no sprinkling in the case of a meal offering. So Rav Papa said, the Braita is referring to a meal offering that accompanies the libations brought with a slaughtered offering. Rav Papa elaborates, it might enter your mind to say that since such a meal offering comes with a slaughtered offering, it is considered like the offering itself. Accordingly, if the only part remaining from an offering is the meal offering that is brought with it, perhaps it is considered as though part of the offering itself remains, and therefore the priest may sprinkle the offering's blood on account of it. Therefore, the Braita teaches us that this is not the halacha. So in any event, Rabbi Yehoshua states in this Braita that the blood of an offering is sprinkled if a minimum amount remains from it. So the same should apply to the remainder of a regular burnt offering. So Rabbi Yochanan cited this Braita as proof that even according to Rabbi Yehoshua, if a portion of the remainder of the meal offering remains intact, then the handful may be burned on account of it. So the Gemara asks, and concerning the one who disqualifies the handful when the remainder is lacking, Reish Lakish, how does he explain the opinion of Rabbi Yehoshua? The Gemara responds, Reish Lakish would claim that it is different here in the case of a meal offering, as the verse states, and the priest shall remove from the meal offering its memorial part, and shall make it smoke upon the altar. Leviticus 2:9. Since it is clear that the verse is discussing a meal offering, the apparently superfluous mention of the meal offering teaches that unless the entire meal offering is intact, the priest shall not burn the handful. The Gemara continues, and the other Amora, Rabbi Yochanan, how does he interpret that verse? So Rabbi Yochanan claims that the phrase "from the meal offering" is referring to a meal offering that was already whole at the time of the removal of its handful, and the verse teaches that he shall burn its handful even though it is currently not whole. Rabbi Yochanan raised an objection to Reish Lakish from a Braita. If before the priest detached the arrangement of showbread and the bowls of frankincense from upon the altar, the bread broke into pieces, the bread is unfit for consumption, and the priest does not burn the frankincense contained in the bowls on account of it. And if the bread broke after the priest detached it, the bread is unfit but the priest burns the frankincense contained in the bowls on account of it. And Rabbi Elazar says, the Baraita does not mean that the priest actually detached the showbread. Rather, it means that once the time to detach it has arrived, the frankincense contained in the bowls may be burned. So even though he has not yet detached it, just as the frankincense contained in the bowls is burned despite the broken showbread, likewise the handful of a meal offering should be burned even when the remainder is lacking. Reish Lakish said to Rabbi Yochanan in response, in accordance with whose opinion is this? It is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, who permits the burning of a handful even when the remainder has been entirely destroyed. And I hold in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehoshua. So Rabbi Yochanan said to him, I am stating a complete halacha to you, a baraita of an unspecified opinion, and you say to me that this baraita is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer alone? So Rabbi Yochanan added, and furthermore, if the baraita is in accordance with the opinion of only Rabbi Eliezer, then why does the baraita mention specifically an instance where the bread broke? According to Rabbi Eliezer, even if the bread was burned or lost entirely, he deems the frankincense contained in the bowls fit for burning as well. The Gemara notes, Reish Lakish was silent and did not respond to the objections of Rabbi Yochanan. The Gemara asked, but why was Reish Lakish silent? Let him say to Rabbi Yochanan that one cannot cite a proof from a baraita that discusses the showbread, a communal offering, because offerings of the community are different, since ritual impurity was permitted for them. So communal offerings may be sacrificed even in a state of ritual impurity. Therefore, it was also permitted to sacrifice them when they are lacking. So Rav Ada bar Ahava said, the fact that Reish Lakish did not respond in this manner is to say that a meal offering that is lacking in measure is considered like a blemished animal, not merely like an impure offering. And there is no instance of a blemished animal being permitted for use as an offering, even in a case of a communal offering. The Gemara relates that Rav Papa was once sitting and saying this halacha, and he noted that Reish Lakish was silent and did not respond to Rabbi Yochanan's objections by differentiating between a communal offering and that of an individual, and that Rav Ada bar Ahava derived from Reish Lakish's silence that a lack in the measure of a meal offering is tantamount to a blemish. So Rav Yosef bar Shmaya said to Rav Papa, we are not dealing with a disagreement that exists between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, even in the case of the Omer meal offering, which is a communal offering. And even so, they disagree. So accordingly, Reish Lakish could not have responded to the objections of Rabbi Yochanan by distinguishing between a communal and an individual offering, and therefore one cannot derive from his silence that a meal offering lacking in its measure is like a blemished animal. The Gemara further discusses the disagreement between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. So Rav Malkiu says that one baraita taught the verse states, and he shall remove, etc., of its fine flour, Leviticus 2:2. This indicates that if the meal offering lacks any amount of its flour, it is disqualified and the priest may not remove a handful from it. Similarly, the term of its oil, Leviticus 2:2, teaches that if the meal offering lacks any amount of its oil, it is disqualified. It is taught in another baraita that the verse states, but that which is left of the meal offering shall be Aaron's and his sons, Leviticus 2:3. It teaches that the remainder of the meal offering is given to the priest only if there was initially a whole meal offering, to the exclusion of meal offerings that was lacking or whose handful was lacking or from which the priest did not burn any frankincense. In such cases, the meal offering is disqualified and its remainder may not be consumed by the priest. Rav Malkiu asks, why do I need two verses to disqualify meal offerings that are lacking? Is it not correct to say that one verse is referring to a meal offering that became lacking before the removal of the handful, that one may not refill it? The one verse is referring to remainder of a meal offering that became lacking between the removal of the handful and its burning upon the altar. And it teaches that one may not burn a handful on account of such a remainder. Rav Malkiu concludes, and if so, then this is a conclusive refutation of the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan in both instances where he disagrees with Reish Lakish. So in the case of a meal offering that became lacking before the removal of the handful, as Rabbi Yochanan holds that one may refill it, and in the case of the remainder that became lacking between the removal of the handful and its burning, as he holds that the handful may be burned. The Gemara rejects this suggestion. No, one verse is indeed referring to a meal offering that became lacking before the removal of the handful, but it is not teaching that this meal offering is disqualified. Rather, this verse indicates that if he brings flour from his home and fills it so that the meal offering is no longer lacking, then yes, it is fit, but if he does not bring more flour, it is not fit. And one verse is indeed referring to the remainder of a meal offering that became lacking between the removal of the handful and its burning upon the altar. Nevertheless, it does not indicate that the handful may not be burned. Rather, it teaches that even though the priest burns the handful on account of such a remainder, that remainder is prohibited for consumption. So the Gemara continues, this is indeed the appropriate explanation of the verses, as a dilemma was raised before the sages. According to the statement of the one who says that in a case where the remainder of a meal offering became lacking between the removal of the handful and its burning upon the altar, the priest burns the handful on account of this remainder. Concerning the remainder itself, what is its status with regard to consumption? May the remainder be eaten. So Ze'eri said that the verse states, but that which is left of the meal offering shall be Aaron's and his sons, which teaches that priests may consume the remainder of the meal offering, but not the remainder of the remainder. So if the remainder became lacking before the handful was burned, the remainder part of the remainder may not be consumed. Alternatively, Rabbi Yanai says that of the meal offering shall be Aaron's and his sons. That phrase, of the meal offering shall be Aaron's and his sons, indicates that the priest may consume only the remainder of a meal offering that was previously whole when the handful was burned, not the remainder of the remainder. The Mishnah teaches, if the priest remove the handful with his left hand of the meal offering, the meal offering is unfit. The Gemara asks, from where are these matters derived? Rabbi Zera said that it is derived from that which the verse states, and the meal offering was presented, and he filled his hand from it. Leviticus 9:17. So Rabbi Zera explains, this hand, I do not know what it is, that is the left hand or the right. When the verse states with regard to the atonement of a leper, and the priest shall take of the log of oil and pour it onto the palm of his own left hand. Leviticus 14:15. It mentions the left hand. So one can therefore derive from that here, where the verse specifies the priest must use his left hand, whereas in any place where it is stated in a verse hand without specification, it is referring only to the right hand. The Gemara asks, and how can this conclusion be derived from the verse discussing the atonement of a leper? This verse is necessary for itself, that is to teach that the oil must be poured on the priest's left hand, not his right. The Gemara answers that another mention of the left hand is written in the same passage, Leviticus 14:16. From this additional mention of the left hand, it may be derived that any specified reference to a hand is referring to the right hand. The Gemara challenges, but say that according to the hermeneutical principle that one restriction after another restriction serves only to amplify. It should be inferred from the additional specification of the left hand that the oil may be poured onto the priest's right hand. The Gemara responds, let another specification of the left hand is written, yet another specification of the left hand is written in that passage, Leviticus 14:26. Accordingly, the hermeneutical principle that one restriction after another serves only to amplify does not apply. So instead, the verse indicates that here the left hand is required, and there is no other instance where the Torah requires the left hand. The Gemara challenges, but one can say that, on the contrary, just as here the left hand is required, so too generally the left hand is required as well. The Gemara responds, 4 mentions of the left hand are written in the passage, 2 with regard to a poor leper, Leviticus 14:26-27, and 2 with regard to a wealthy one, Leviticus 14:15-16. Accordingly, 3 of the specifications serve to indicate that the oil may be poured only onto the left hand, while the additional mention serves to restrict the use of the left hand to the case of a leper alone. So Rabbi Yirmiyah said to Rabbi Zera, according to your opinion, one interprets homiletically the additional specification in the passage discussing the purification of a leper. If so, there is another apparently superfluous verse, upon the thumb of his right hand and upon the big toe of his right foot, Leviticus 14:17, which is written with regard to the placement of the oil upon the right thumb and the big toe of a wealthy leper. So why do I need the verse to specify that the oil is placed on the leper's right thumb and big toe? And that is the end of Daf 9.